In episode 15, Brandon and I explore the first of a two-part series on the manager intelligence skill, emotional intelligence. We'll explore why the best managers have honed and developed this skill to lead strong. Let's dive right in.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Leading Strong, the place to be to level up your leadership effectiveness on one of your most important roles, engaging your employees. Managers are responsible for at least 70% of their employees' engagement. The best managers, like you, lead strong by constantly honing and developing the skills needed to keep their teams engaged. Your hosts, Darren Veresamy and Brandon Miller, are the co-founders of 34 Strong, a company that creates great places to work. Their team has worked in Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and small businesses to lead strong. Now over to Darren.
Welcome to Season 1 of Leading Strong, where we will dive deep to grow your manager intelligence. I'm your host, Darren Veresamy, here to serve you in your continued discovery and growth to lead strong. This episode of Leading Strong is brought to you by 34 Strong, where organizations just like yours become great places to work. To find out more, check out 34strong.com. Good afternoon, Brandon.
Good afternoon, Darren.
All right. Well, we are jumping into emotional intelligence. This is kind of like a bonus manager intelligence skill for what we're covering here in season 1. And this one, there's so much meat on the bone. I think we're probably going to be splitting this into 2 episodes here with what we have to break down for everybody. It's such a critical skill for leaders to have when they're working through any time. And 2020 has been a year of all sorts of crisis, uncertainty, different challenges. And emotionally intelligent leaders are the ones that are really standing up as we're going through in organizations, as we're moving along. Tell us a little bit about why emotional intelligence is so important and so critical in leadership to be able to lead and engage teams.
Yeah, I think this particular skill, this particular understanding of oneself is, according to experts, the number one predictor of professional success and personal excellence. And emotional intelligence at its core is your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and in others. And with that, the ability to interpret those emotions and present a positive, beneficial response that is good for you, of course, and good for those you lead. So managers strong in this are highly effective because they're trusted, they're safe, they're effective in communication, and they're stable. You know what you're going to get from them most occasions because they attend to this skill set on a daily, regular basis.
Yeah, and what are some of the ways that managers that have that are really strong naturally in this emotional intelligence skill? What are some of the things that they do, Brandon? And what's it like to be on a team when there is a manager that's really strong in this particular skill?
Well, what we know about EQ is that the first place that emotion comes is in and of itself something we don't control. So how I feel, if I feel happy, sad, angry, afraid, or ashamed. Those are the big 5. So happy, sad, angry, afraid, or ashamed. Those are coming. Those emotions come. What EQ is, it's how I interpret that sensation, interpret those thoughts, interpret those feelings, and then I decide what is the best way to deliver how I'm feeling, or key, Darren, or not. Those times where it's time to just let this one settle, say nothing, which is often the best response you can give in a situation is say nothing. What it allows is a leader that in management, because management can be frustrating, management is tiring, it can wear on us, it can cause us to feel like we're not getting somewhere with a person we're leading. And with EQ and the understanding that it isn't static, it grows, I become more effective. I learn to put myself into the position of knowing who I'm dealing with, how their emotions affect mine and mine theirs, and therefore I learn the best touch. I learn the best words. I learn the best approach. And it really takes the best of the manager skills that we've been talking about through this series, and it captures them all together. in one area of growth that really brings the skilled individualize, the integrity, our ability to invest, it brings it all into a focal point of, okay, I got to know myself to be effective to manage you. If I don't know me, I can't effectively know you, and I got to start me, then go to you and build both out as my approach to being effective in management.
Yeah. One of the things you said there, I think is really important for our listeners to capture in this. Sometimes we hear of emotional intelligence, we hear of EQ, the emotional quotient, and sometimes we'll connect the dots and we'll think that that might be something that's static. You either have it or you don't. And one of the things Brandon said there that's so important is it is not static. The reason this is kind of one of our bonus manager intelligence skills that we've all heard of is it is something that we do have the capacity to grow, to strengthen as we're going along. And I think it's really important what you said and you reminded people of there, Brandon. Sometimes the action that we take is the action that we don't take, right? It's what we choose not to do in the situation, not to respond to something. If somebody's firing something off and they're overly animated in a different situation, it might not be that we are responding to that we're engaging in that. That is actually part of it. It's easy to get into the draw and into the pull of where we have to get hooked into something. I remember I've shared this before. I had many, many years in construction, right? I had 10 years in construction. I vividly remember some projects, Brandon, I was on, and people would go through and they'd fire off these emails because a project deadline was coming up. And I would ask my team when I was coaching our other project managers, I would ask them, I would say, because they'd come in, their cage all rattled, and I'd say, does that email even warrant a response? Does that warrant a response? And just that pause to think about that, to engage it from an emotional level, asking, does that warrant a response? Was that person just firing off the handle emotionally? If we go down the path of engaging in email jujitsu, where does that actually take us? Maybe there's something that's deeper. Maybe picking up the phone, having that call, hitting the purge button for them might be what's needed. That's some of the aspects of what we're going to see with emotional intelligence as we're going through. What are the highs and lows of this skill when we think about it? We always love to get into this for each of these. Take us through the highs and lows of emotional intelligence.
So when we start with the low, I want to introduce a term, and we've mentioned it in the past. It's imposter syndrome. And when we think about imposter syndrome, what we're talking about is a fear of being found out, that I don't have what it takes to do what I'm being asked to do. And many managers, leaders, parents, people who find themselves in a role that is seemingly beyond them can fall into this trap. And when you are here, what begins to happen is you're afraid that others will know that either you're not on par with the knowledge you need, you're not reacting well, you're trying to suppress instead of express an understanding of what you are trying to learn and grow with your team. And so what will happen here is that imposter syndrome reveals itself where I can't admit when I'm wrong. I have the most difficult time being wrong, being found out that I didn't get it the way I should. And so it feels combative. It feels like it's a win-lose scenario. So Darren and I are discussing something and it starts to turn into, I need to win the debate, even if we're just talking about the weather. We're talking about life around us, and all of a sudden it turns into this place of that it starts to feel combative. Well, imposter syndrome is an overplay of emotion, and it's the low point. And so what happens is that you'll watch managers get stressed easily agitated, easily stressed. They'll have a difficult time asserting themselves because it feels like I'm trying to force my will and get you to do what I want. So it starts to look authoritarian in nature, command and control. It could be demeaning. It can put people into a place where I start to categorize them on the basis of who I most appreciate, who I don't. And then what ultimately will occur is grudges. You and I had an exchange. I didn't like how it went. Maybe you outsmarted me, not because we were necessarily needing you to, just because you knew more about a topic than I did. I harbor this grudge. Well, I'm going to get him back. I'm going to put him in his place next time. I'm going to retaliate. And that retaliation, if that is a mindset that creeps up and you feel like you got to get people back, one up them, you have low EQ. Your EQ is not good, because in that place on that scale of 1 to 5, you're closer to a 1, because things are creeping out of you that do not help build engagement. They don't build well-being. They don't build trust, compassion, stability, hope. All the needs we talked about, it won't meet them on the low end.
No, not at all. And that gets in, Simon Sinek talks about the whole world of the infinite game that we play. And the big difference between the finite game and the infinite game is when we're playing a finite game, we're playing specifically to win as if it ends there. Well, life is an infinite game and organizations are infinite. As a manager, that's an infinite game that we're playing because you're going to win today and you're back dealing with that same employee tomorrow. So we get into these one-upsman games that we're playing, and that leads us down a path to nowhere. So when we reframe the type of game that we're playing and really think about it as how are we playing to keep things moving along, that is such a critical aspect of this. And that's what takes us to the high side of this particular skill. Take us on a deeper dive of the higher side of emotional intelligence, Brandon.
So the stimulus comes in to the brain, comes into the spinal cord, the limbic system, now has to decide, well, what do I do with this stimulus? What do I do with this happy, sad, angry, afraid, ashamed? And so at the high level, we're interpreting how we feel, we're interpreting what we're thinking, we're interpreting how our initial response is, and we're filtering it for what's best for the people around us. So we use maturity for a reason. Maturity is often synonymous with selflessness. The more mature you are, the more aware of others you are. So you become less concerned with you and more concerned with us, we, our. Some people with high EQ follow the platinum rule. They're not just looking for how to be treated the way that they want. They want to treat people the way they need, what those people prefer and how they really need to understand. And so as such, these are leaders that they are, as I mentioned earlier, they're safe. Their team can trust them because they speak before they think, or they don't speak when they're aware of an emotion that isn't helpful. They'll reserve, they'll hold it back. They are rational in their approach, often rational, measured in their tone, careful to determine not only how to process their emotion, but even what triggers their emotion. So as EQ progresses up that scale of 1 to 5, these are people that are become in tune with what are their buttons, so what are their triggers, what is it that moves them to a negative place, and then start to dismantle. They start to work backwards. Well, what can I see in myself? Where might I address? And so the questions become the right questions, which is, I am not a victim to my emotions. I am not subject to them. I'm okay being wrong. I'm okay being right. I'm okay being in a place where we won or we lost, because none of that affects my understanding of who I am, what I bring to the table, and the ever-increasing understanding that my IQ is not static. I get more of it today, so I'm better tomorrow. And that attitude makes for great managers.
That is huge for how we think about it. I want to capture something that you said there too, just the language that we're using, right? The focus towards the us, the we, as opposed to the me and the I. That's a huge tell right there in the shift that we need to make for the emotional intelligence growth. There's a great book that had to be our book recommendation for this week. I mean, we had to have it. It's Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and that is by Dr. Travis Bradbury and Gene Graves as well. Take us through what is so powerful about this book, especially when we think about it in its 2.0 version here.
Yeah, it comes with an assessment. You can get your hands around your EQ. How aware are you of your emotions? Interestingly enough, only 36% of 500,000 people who have assessed their EQ really are in touch. So it's about a third, which means 2/3 of people who assessed are driven by emotion. That's where they go. And you know them because it's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. And they're very hard to work with. So I love Bradbury's work. I think he has done a great job and continues to build on his body of work on EQ. He's a great guy to follow on LinkedIn and other places because he comes out with some fantastic articles. We've mentioned some of his other work here in our series. When you look at his book, I really appreciate the ability to baseline a definition of emotional intelligence and the hope and encouragement that wherever you're at now, you have access to more. This is the one part of us, and he does a good job of comparing emotional intelligence, EQ, with intelligence quotient, IQ. And what he describes, and I happen to agree with his evidence, is that IQ might be static, meaning there's so much you can get of it, and then you can stay in a space where you stay strong, where your IQ fits, and you do really well to know that and reach it. But what he talks about is EQ is not fixed at all. It is very much in the user's hands. And something that they mentioned in the book, Darren, I thought very interesting was that emotional awareness, emotional intelligence is not taught in school. It is not taught. It is
Not at all.
No, it is not. You
Not at
can't
all.
take a class on EQ. There isn't places you can go. And it's so fascinating when you step back and go, so according to many researchers, this is the number one predictor of what you're going to do well in life. Not just career, family, life, relationships, investments, your contribution to humanity, your giving back in all of the places we might. This is the indicator. And it's one that, I think you and I have even challenged each other and ourselves and our team. We want to stay on the edge of growth here. We want to stay in that growth mindset. We want to stay in a place because I could speak for the two of us in our 8-year journey. Think of how far we've come.
Big time. Big time.
By staying in a space of I refuse to settle for my IQ being or EQ being less than it was yesterday. I want it to keep growing. And it's the common sense thing to do.
It really, it so is. And when you're actually around others that are committed to that, you're going to have the times where maybe you are naturally in that higher state of emotional intelligence, right, Brandon? You might naturally be there, but we all have our triggers, right? So you might typically be in the 4 to 5 range where you are on that higher end of that scale. If you were just taking a self-assessment, 1 being on the low end, if you had to rate yourself and 5 being on the higher end, and that might be where you typically live, but there might be something that happens. 2020 has been filled with uncertainty and all sorts of challenges that we've dealt with. And those exogenous, those external triggers might take your level down to a 2 or a 3. And what's powerful is when you're around others that are committed to staying strong and growing, when you fall to that level, they're the ones that they'll notice that and they'll extend the hand to help bring you back up to where you're at. So it's not just the element. When we're talking about this from a managerial lens, when you sharpen that saw for yourself and you're able to help impart that on others, it actually becomes infectious in a very good way and contagious in a very good way amongst our teams. And we start seeing that kind of come together a lot more. Yeah, great book here for you to take a look at. As we close out the first section,
you want to mention one thing about the book if you can, because I was just reminded of something as you were talking. I mentioned that IQ isn't something we chose for ourselves. We can maximize every bit of our IQ, but some people, I happen to have cousins in my family, and there's 4 brothers, all my cousins, and all 4 of them are graduates from Harvard and have done extremely well in their field of choice. And when I compare myself to their academic prowess and their IQ, I'm left wanting. I'm clearly outmanned when it comes to their IQ. These are guys that scored perfect scores on the SAT in high school. Every test they've ever taken, I'm pretty sure one of them has a photographic memory. I don't think he's missed a test question in his life. And so when I look at that, I go, wow, what an awesome advantage. But interestingly enough, what Bradbury calls out in the book is that people with high IQ don't necessarily equate to high success unless they also have high EQ. And interestingly enough, many, many, many more of us with average IQ actually test out higher on EQ. And EQ, 58% of the time, is going to determine your professional success. It's going to decide what promotion you get, what your ceiling is, where you can keep growing. So it's interesting to know that it's the one predictor of success, as they define in the book. It's the flexible indicator. It's a flexible skill. And you, whether you're low IQ, mid-range IQ, high IQ, you are fully in control of EQ. And that's such great news, right? Because this one, no one gets to choose for you how you respond to emotion. That's on us.
Yeah, that's hugely important. And there was just a couple, since we got into that piece, there was some other data that came out about that as well. What was it here? So only about 35% of people have high EQ. Is that what you had said earlier, right? And then 90% of high performers of all types of jobs have high EQ and make, on average, $29,000 more per year. That's something to be said. So not only can this help you to be more effective as a manager, it can have an impact on your overall financial well-being, right? Anything else to say on that point?
Well, it's such an incredible indicator because EQ starts to get into how you make decisions, how you manage your time, how you handle your assertiveness, your ability to be empathetic, stress tolerance, anger management. big one, team. Anger management is massive because for every one time we speak in anger, respond with something that is derogatory, that is demeaning, people will remember that 5 to 10 times longer than they will the positive reinforcement you give them. It sticks. Negative comments stick. And so high EQ, when you can manage your anger and understand tolerance to change, effective communication, even your social skills, how you interact with people different than you, your diversity and inclusion ability is so tied to this one. So it's fascinating when you can tie a dollar amount to it, which is what the research is telling us, because that really is where hopefully ears perk up and go, hold on a minute, wait a minute. Of all the skills you've talked about so far, this one ties directly to my marketability within the organization I'm a part of or others that I might attract because of how impactful this is. Even above where your degree came from or what your ending score was, this one will determine how far we climb and where we go.
Yeah. And I think I want to leave us with a quote here that will springboard us into part 2 of this. And it's that Maya Angelou statement that many of us have heard. People will not always remember what you said. They won't remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And when we get into the next episode that kind of continues to build on this, we're going to dig a little deeper into the how and some different techniques that we want to be aware of in going through growing this particular skill. Now that you have this context and this foundational understanding of the difference between IQ and EQ. If you want to continue your growth in Leading Strong by hanging out with others committed to leading strong, join one of our LinkedIn or Facebook groups by looking for the Leading Strong Show. The truth is, organizational results like productivity, profitability, and low employee turnover rise and fall based on employee engagement. The world is starving for strong leaders as they not only impact an organization's performance, they create massive influence on an employee's overall health and well-being. If you want to learn more about becoming a great place to work or 34 Strong's signature Leading Strong programs, simply go to 34strong.com, where you will also be able to access resources you can start using immediately and stay connected with us. I want to thank you for sharing this episode with everyone you know who will benefit. Be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcasting channels, and please leave us a review. A big shout out to Wendell Fishman for writing and arranging the tune Aunt Lion for Leading Strong. Remember, everyone deserves a great place to work, and any workplace can be great. You can create culture by intention and design, and change happens with every life you touch. I am Darren Veresami, here to help you lead strong. Until next time, my friends, I'm out.